do you like? Who do you think has more pressure on them this year? Is it USC leaving to go to the Big Ten, or is it Texas or Oklahoma leaving to go to the SEC?
Gosh, I think that Oklahoma doesn't have any pressure right now as much because I don't think people have expectations after last year.
Yeah.
I think they're actually in a place where people can go, oh, look, they're a lot better than we thought.
Right.
That they would be, although I think people do automatically assume I think they'll be better. I just don't have any expectation of them to contend for conference and playoffs just because I think they're not quite that good yet. I think they'll be better. I think if they stay healthier, particularly at quarterback, they'll be better. I think it's Texas and USC. I think they're you could not separate them.
Right.
Because they've got the same problem, right? They've got the same problem in that they are the big dog from each of USC and Texas in their respective soon to be former conferences are the big dog. They're the ones who are making decisions. They're the ones who USC prevented expansion in the Pac-12. Texas prevented expansion in the Big 12. So did UCLA and Oklahoma, but Texas was part of that. Oklahoma was part of that. And Texas has built itself up so big, and they've earned some of that. Some of that is past history. Oklahoma's the real big dog of the Big 12. They're the one who's owned the league for most of the time. I don't think they have as much pressure this particular year. Texas has not won that conference title in so long. Since 2009. And so since they haven't won it since 2009, it's a much bigger deal for them to win it on the way out the door. I think that there's a little bit more pressure on them. I do think, though, that they will be a little bit better about handling it because what does it matter if you don't? You're about to be in a new league. Yeah. Everything's going to start anew. All it's going to matter at the end of it is you didn't win the Big 12 again on your way out the door. People can be snarky about it, but they're going to be the SEC with new goals in a year.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'm not really worried about that for them. So, but I do think that, but the USC I think will have a lot, and both leagues are going to be tight. The Big 12 is what it is, and the Pac-12 is going to be, which is what I said many times, is going to be ultimately the most sad thing for the Pac-12 is that the last year of its existence, probably. And I say that because we don't know what's going to happen, but it's certainly setting that way. But the last year of the Pac-12, especially the last year of the Pac-12, as it was set up to be, has a really good USC team, a really good Oregon team, a really good Washington team, a really good Utah team, a really good Oregon State team, and probably a really good UCLA team, and a really good Washington State team. And improving teams in Tucson and at Arizona. Arizona State will be interesting. We haven't even talked about it, but Jaden Rashada won the starting job there. So true freshman, new coach. We'll see him rock through that. But I've listed most of the teams in the league that are all going to be pretty good.
See, when I look at the Pac-12, I think it's going to be arguably the most entertaining league this year, top to bottom. But I also feel like it's a situation where everybody is so good and there's so much on the line that none of them will make the playoff. I feel like it's going to be where they cannibalize each other and you see multiple, 2 or 3 lost teams, and it's just a cluster at the end to try to see who makes it to the Pac-12 championship. And I think they're going to find themselves on the outside looking in of the college football playoff again, even though they have probably, compared to pound for conference, them and the SEC probably have the most teams likely that could make it in. But I think because of the parity, you're going to see the Pac-12 cannibalize each other and nobody makes it from that conference into the college football playoff.
Okay, I'm going to take Utah out of this equation right now in the playoff just because of Cam Rising's injury.
Right, that's fair.
If he was completely healthy, they would be in this. So if Utah fans are watching this, I'm going to take them out of this. Just for that reason.
Right.
Because they might lose some games early and be a playoff caliber team. This team would probably be a 12-team playoff team, I know he says he's going to try and play against Florida, but
he has no need to.
Let's just see what happens. What happens. But USC could make the playoff.
Absolutely.
Oregon could make the playoff. Washington could make the playoff. I don't think Washington State could, But I do think Oregon State
could.
I think Oregon State could. I think so. You've got 4 teams there that I think could make the playoff. So that's 4 teams I think could make the playoff. In the Big 12, I reasonably think it's 2 or 3 right now.
I would say 2 max, honestly.
Yeah, I would say Texas and Kansas State right now.
Yeah.
And I think they could both make the playoff. And again, this is a league where the teams that have won have come out of nowhere, and the way you come out of nowhere is everybody cannibalizes each other, like you said.
Yeah.
So where Kansas State won it last year, TCU made the playoff, but didn't win the league.
Right.
Like, they came out of nowhere. Kansas State kind of came out of nowhere. Baylor came out of nowhere. You know, it was that. And so the come out of nowhere thing, that's what's the pressure on Texas, is that somebody could come up out of nowhere, and even then, that might mean Texas is 10-2 or 9-3 and wins the league and looks really good, but because you have close games where you miss kicks or somebody makes kicks or a fumble here, a fumble there. So yeah, I think there's 2. I think the ACC that there are 2.
Yeah, Clemson, Florida State.
Clemson and Florida State. I think North Carolina could be close-ish, but I think they've got other holes.
I think Drake May has a tremendous season, but North Carolina as a whole takes a step back. I just feel like they lost too much, and it's going to be too much pressure on his shoulders. Mac Brown, too. I mean, while he's still an excellent coach, like there's the ACC, like you have Duke on the rise, Pitt's always tricky, Louisville. So I'm kind of Florida State, Clemson, and everybody else. And that's just me.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think that's the case right now. I think in the Big Ten, I think you have 3 legit in Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. I would not be surprised to see Wisconsin hang around all year long under Luke Fickell, even in year 1. But I do think that there's so many other questions about other teams in that league that would not be certainly like right now you can make the playoff. And the SEC, you have several.
Yes.
You know, LSU, Georgia, obviously, Bama, Tennessee. Those, I would say those 4 right now.
Yeah.
Ole Miss, if they get the quarterback going,
they're going to upset a few people this year.
Ole Miss, if they get the quarterback going, you know, I can tell you who's, I think Devin Leary make Kentucky better. I just don't think that they are pound for pound able to run with anything. Like Florida's still probably a couple years away from doing that. Like they've got to get to a bowl game first. You know, so Florida, Vanderbilt, Mizzou, A&M, I'm not putting in that. Mississippi State, I'm not putting in that. You know, so there's plenty of schools, you know, that I'm just not putting in the mix.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, I think for sure are going to be hanging around. And Ole Miss to me would be the dark horse of if they get on the right side of things, they can maybe get rolling.
I'm honestly scared of when LSU plays them. I think that's a team that could really push it. I'm nervous about that game, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take a break.